An explosive interview with former number 10 advisor Dominic Cummings reveals complete disdain of the man that he put in office and his desire to break Whitehall. If you ignore the politics, does Dominic Cummings have a point when he says that Whitehall is stopping governments from bringing in changes? And if that is the case, then why aren't governments able to change Whitehall? We'll be getting stuck into that in just a moment. Former EU Trade Commissioner Cecilia Malmström tell us what we can expect this week from Trump's tariffs. Can the EU actually stand up to Donald Trump? Now, after 2, we're going to be looking ahead to the 59th Super Bowl tonight. And did the UK promise to give Ukraine £3 billion a year for the next 100 years? Well, we're going to be fact-checking that alongside some other of this week's wildest rumours with our friends over at Full Fact. After 3, Man vs. Food's Adam Richmond joins us with his take on game-watching snacks. What are the best and tastiest snacks to watch live sports with? And finally, Mr. James May is back on the show to talk to me more about the UK's cheapest car. He thinks it's important. It's a Dacia and it's electric. All that is coming up between now and 4 o'clock. Now, Boris Johnson's chief political advisor, Dominic Cummings, has admitted that to the Sunday Times that he orchestrated the downfall of his former boss. Cummings was Johnson's advisor from July 2019 to December 2020, and he told the Sunday Times news review editor Josh Glancy that he almost immediately regretted helping Boris Johnson win the election. Cummings told Josh Glancy why he felt that this was his responsibility to oust the former Prime Minister.
Yeah, I mean, I orchestrated it with a bunch of other people in Westminster who agreed with me that leaving him rattling around number 10, making a whole set of appalling decisions should be ended as soon as we could do. And also we had a sort of responsibility for it, right? Like, we won the 2019 election. We told people to vote for him. We put him in.
Yeah.
And then if you put someone in, and then they kind of go off the reservation and start actually vandalising the country, well, you've obviously got a responsibility to do something about it.
It's Dominic Cummings speaking to Josh Glancy. You can read the entire incredible interview in today's Sunday Times. Of course, you can get hold of it online with your Times subscription. Now, earlier, I spoke to former Conservative MP for Lichfield, Michael Fabricant, who shared his reaction to that interview.
Well, I was surprised that he actually admitted that he had a part in, maybe a major part in Boris Johnson's downfall. But it was a very interesting read indeed, actually, and particularly his views on the role of the civil service, really, in controlling governments. Very much, actually, like Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister all those years ago. Clearly, the civil service does have a major role. And probably, in certainly his view, is that the role is far too great.
Well, do you agree with that? Do you think that the civil service gets in the way of government?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, I've had Prime Minister and after Prime Minister say to me, it's like fighting with a blancmange. Sometimes you just can't get things through. And if you want to actually go in a particular direction of policy and the civil service oppose, it's virtually impossible to overcome the will of the civil service. What we do about it, I'm not so sure.
Well, I was going to ask you that. I mean, you were in government. Well, the Conservatives were in power for 14 years. Dominic Cummings was there from 2019. He didn't get that support, did he, from Boris Johnson, which he mentions in this interview, to change Whitehall. Why do you think that was? Was Boris Johnson not interested in changing Whitehall, changing the civil service?
Well, either that, it could be that he wasn't interested, or it could be that he feared what retribution Whitehall may impose on Boris Johnson, making things even more difficult. I mean, trying to get the best out of Brexit. We achieved a lot with Brexit. Everyone said it would be impossible to get a free trade agreement, a tariff-free agreement with the European Union unless we were in the customs union. Well, actually, we proved them wrong, didn't we? We have got tariff-free trade and we're not in the customs union. But there was a lot more that could have been done and a lot more that Boris wanted to do. But the civil service were completely opposed to it. Moreover, of course, we had the massive distraction at the time of COVID, and the civil service say, well, all their efforts were being put into fighting this pandemic.
What did you make of a couple of the lines in this extraordinary piece where I'm going to read here carefully because there's some swear words that I can't say out on the radio. Dominic Cummings says that when he was let go by Boris Johnson, if we could put it that way, Boris Johnson said to him that I'm sure you'll end up being proved right on my decisions, i.e. that Dominic Cummings thought that Boris Johnson was taking the wrong decisions. I've almost definitely effed it all up. But what's the point of being the king if I can't F everything up? What's the point of me being the king if I'm just going to do what you tell me to do?
Well, there is truth to it. But of course, one of the problems with Boris is that, or you could say, actually, one of the great advantages of Boris was that he was a big ideas man always. What he wasn't was a details man. And Dominic Cummings is very much a details man, as well as being actually a very good strategist. Nevertheless, if you are king, if you are prime minister, then you do like to think that your word goes. Though, as I said earlier on, many people would say it's actually the Mandarins, the civil servants' words that actually go.
Was it a missed opportunity, Michael, do you think? You had a very, very popular prime minister who had an 80-seat majority, of course, in 2019. You had someone like Dominic Cummings who had some very strong ideas about actually bringing about real change within government. He talks about it in great detail in this brilliant piece in today's Sunday Times about how governments, in order to bring about change, really need to restructure how government works. You had the two sort of basic elements for what should be a successful government. What went wrong?
Yeah, well, I think COVID went wrong. It just provided a massive distraction. I mean, it's easy now, 2-3 years after the end of the pandemic, to say, oh, COVID. But you know what? At the time when it started, there wasn't a vaccine. There were predictions of multiple deaths. There were pictures on our television screens of people dying in the streets of Rome and Naples, where their National Health Service collapsed completely. So, it was a massive distraction. But yes, of course, it was a lost opportunity. And I'm very sad about that, because I think there have been very few prime ministers of vision in recent years. You had Churchill, you had, of course, Margaret Thatcher, you had Tony Blair. And I think Boris was a man of vision. But people of vision often need others to see the detailed policy through. As I say, Churchill was destroyed, if you like, by the Second World War, in the sense that he concentrated on the Second World War, and it led to his downfall in 1945 when Labour got in. And you can go on and on about that. But a lot of prime ministers are just managers. Is Keir Starmer a man of vision? Was John Major a man of vision? They were managers.
Do you think we could ever see something that along the lines that's happening in the US? I mean, essentially you have a non-government department. I mean, DOGE may stand for Department of Government Efficiency, but it has not been sanctioned by Congress. Essentially, it doesn't really exist. But do you think we could have something similar like that ever happen in Whitehall? Someone come in and start cutting
something
it.
like that. In
really?
fact, we've got
somebody who's not been elected to start cutting civil servants' jobs?
Could it ever happen here? Well, it does happen all the time. The Cabinet Office does take control. My argument is they don't take enough control. They're not prepared because they themselves are part of the system. And that's why maybe we need a Doge-like organisation. Maybe something that Dominic Cummings talks about, technocrats coming in, business people who've actually run something, unlike, by the way, most of the cabinet or any of the cabinet, the present cabinet. You need people who've actually run businesses to analyse what is going on in the UK civil service and what is making it so difficult to get administrations, left or right or centre, to get through their programme for which they've been democratically elected.
So, Michael, before we go, can I put you down as a Dominic Cummings fan?
A good question, and one I've got to think about. I wouldn't say a fan, but certainly someone whom I respect.